I will start recording. So yes, thank you everyone for coming to the Open Education Week of events for this year, but especially this panel on OER in action, faculty stories of success. I have four wonderful panelists who have been either awarded the OER award through the university library or have been nominated for the award just to share their experiences with open education, with their implementation in their classroom, their personal experience, just learning and working through it, just to give you a bigger insight into it, besides just seeing the paragraph about what open education resources are, seeing how you actually implement it, create it, modify, adapt it, and how students and other faculty feel about it. And so I want to start first with just a simple introduction. If my panelists could just introduce yourselves, tell a little bit about your teaching background, what departments you're in, if you want to share some of the courses that you're teaching so people can connect with you more and see themselves in you, as well as just share a little bit about why you got interested in open education resources. And on my screen, I have Jeremy first, so we can go Jeremy, Jen Shaker, Jennifer Mahoney, and Jennifer Guiliano.
Uh, Hello, my name is Jeremy Price, and I am Associate Professor of Education, Technology, Innovation, and Pedagogy in the School of Education at IU Indianapolis. And I teach courses that help teachers use technology better in their classrooms and online. So that's basically what I do, and I've had to do a lot of reworking of that within the past 2 years, which I'll probably be able to talk about.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Shaker. I'm a faculty member in the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. Um, and I teach primarily in our undergraduate program, um, as well as doing a lot of professional education for fundraisers and also online teaching and in-person teaching. And I'll save my OER tales for as we go.
Is it Jennifer G or me?
You, Mahoney.
Okay. I'm Jennifer Price Mahoney. I am a faculty member in the English department at IU Indianapolis. I'm the associate director of our writing program, and I teach a lot of hybrid and online courses. And I also do a lot of the administration of our composition courses, W131, which is the big one that all the students have to get credit for.
We have our last Jennifer. I did tell our panelists this earlier. We have all J names, all similar sounding names. This was not intentional, but I do love it.
Hi, I'm Jen Guiliano. I'm a professor of history in the School of Liberal Arts. I teach a variety of courses, both introduction to US and Native history, but I also teach the digital and digital public courses at both the undergraduate and the graduate level. So I've deployed OER in all of my courses to this point. So
Awesome. Thank you for all of you all sharing that information. I do want to mention to our attendees, I will leave time at the end for you to ask any questions. So feel free to get those ready, whether you want to unmute to say those or put them in the chat. If you want to drop them in earlier, I can also ask them during our conversation. But I do want to start off with the question for our panelists. What motivated you to adopt or create OER for your courses?
I can go first. I think we all have answers for that. So I'm going first. So mine don't get taken by somebody else. Um, I I was motivated in particularly when we began teaching my class that I'm the director of all online. And so it made a lot of sense to move from a hard copy book to all online. Students were having challenges getting the book. And, I had other reasons for being ready for a new text, but that carried forward some of the same principles. Um, cost was an issue for the students, getting it in time was an issue for the students. And then for me as the instructor, I wanted to make some changes and do some other things that OER would facilitate that I couldn't do with my existing text. So I'll stop there.
I can go. I have a couple of very particular things, so I don't think anybody else will take them. I first of all, I started kind of playing around with OER in the mid 2000s. I was helping my librarian friend Jana Hollingsworth then, now Jana Allaby. We were kind of looking at OER. I wasn't that impressed at the time. But then in 2019, in the fall, something very particular happened. I had a student in a wheelchair who was really struggling just to get into our classroom. It was not the most accessible of rooms. And then I watched this student come in, and they had their backpack strapped to the back of their wheelchair. They had to, pull this heavy, cumbersome backpack off. And then they had to struggle to get this huge textbook that my program had adopted for our course. And it just it just hit me like a ton of bricks how inaccessible and inequitable this was. I didn't particularly like that book anyway. It was expensive and it was huge. And I didn't feel like it really needed to be for our course. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and like Jen was saying, we were doing everything all online. But when we came back, the writing program did this inventory, and we found that our instructors had, in that chaos of trying to adjust on the fly in spring of 2020, they had adopted so many different kinds of books, so many different ways of accessing materials. And so we had 45 sections of a course in which most of them were using different materials, and that really upset and disturbed us a bit. So we decided to try to develop one consistent OER that would be equitable and accessible and not one of those financial burdens on our students.
So, like most people, I think price was a consideration for adoption. I think the ease of materials was also a consideration. I think the third thing for me was the ability to diversify viewpoints. More traditional publishing in the field of history tends to have sort of a section or a chapter on topics I cared about, like Native Americans or African Americans. But very rarely did they sort of show a 360-degree view of history or the topics of history. So for my analog, which is what I call my survey classes, for those courses, it was really about diversification of viewpoints. For my digital classes, it was really about getting up-to-date materials. As technology changes, instructions change, dashboards change, interfaces change. And so OERs were much more adaptable and quicker to sort of put out new versions of things than published textbook were. Even ebook platforms like we get with Macmillan, or those sorts of publishers were still years behind. And so part of OER for me was about making sure my students had the most recent version of materials that they needed to work with the tools that we were going to work with.
Yeah, I think my reason sort of spanned a lot of the things that have already been mentioned. Um, but with a particular twist, the price is definitely a concern. What it is I tend to create most of the OER materials for my courses myself. And that's largely because the field of educational technology, particularly with teachers, is not all that interesting and also equitable, and has one perspective which is sort of the default one, which doesn't allow for a lot of thoughtful engagement with um, things like equity and inclusion, social justice, when we were allowed to talk about those things um, 2 months ago. Um, so what I ended up doing was I ended up creating not so much texts, but more activity structures for students to work through, and often making use of um, other OERs, whether, having them go out and find something, or even to use digital resources that are available through the IUI library. Um, and so, again, you can't do that with a textbook. And textbooks in my field just, I think, are pretty much still stuck on smart boards, which are not all that interesting. So that's why I did what I did.
And I'm sure all of your students have appreciated the work that you have done to give them those open education resources, like for the reasons that you are mentioning, whether it was for accessibility reasons or financial reasons, or just making sure that the information there was the most up to date and holistic information presented to them. And so for that reason, I want to combine these next two questions because we were hitting on this, but I would love for you all to expand on this a little bit more for our attendees to understand better the impact of using OER in your classrooms, whether that's towards how it was for you, or especially just thinking about student engagement, or if you saw an increase or better improvement in their performance academically with their coursework, or even more to what Mahoney was saying earlier about accessibility. I would love for you all to share more information about the impact of what you saw with your implementation of your OER.
So, I not only use an OER in my US history survey, I use an OER that allows for remixing and addition. So I use a textbook called American Yop, which is a collaboratively written online textbook that's an open educational resource. And one of the really great things about how that textbook works is I can actually pull the textbook into whatever platform I'm using and add additional content areas to it. And that customization has had a tremendous impact on the student so that what I've been able to do, for example, is add sections that are specific to like the state of Indiana into the textbook so that when the students are looking at national trends or national issues or national events, they're also then getting sort of like a what's going on here at home in Indiana kind of viewpoint. And that makes a tremendous difference to the students because it makes it very personal to them in a way that a lot of US history textbooks tend to be sort of more corporate or aggregate in talking about like famous people, but not so much sort of their people at home.
And so one of the activity structures that I created, because I actually, my goal, so I typically, for my activities, I typically have two kinds of goals. One is sort of like I call it like a social justice goal, and then another one is a digital education goal. And so um, one of the activities, um, it involved breaking students into groups. Um, and each group was assigned a specific spot, a different specific place on campus. And what they did was they sort of dug through, the history of that particular spot using different kinds of resources, including things, like I said, that are available through the IUI library. Um, and so, um, and also I made some Raspberry Pi things, like it's a little mini computer and it's sitting in a Tupperware container, and it measures ambient noise and air quality. And so each of those groups can measure those things at their spots. And so I think that a lot of the students really enjoyed having that kind of responsibility of, like, having it be so um, right there. I mean, like, sometimes their spot was right out our classroom window. Um, and so, I think that that was something that made it much more real for them. Um, I'm also in a weird spot because my class is mostly taught to sophomores in the education program. They're kind of making the decision about whether or not they want to continue with education. So there are plenty of students who just kind of give up. Um, so that kind of is a downer. But the students who are, get involved and they take ownership of their spot on campus, really enjoy that, and really take pride in sort of bringing all those materials together.
Thank- Oh, did anyone else want to share?
Oh, I can share a little bit. Um, the class that I teach that I use an OER text in is 100 level introductory class on philanthropy and giving and serving and volunteering. And it's really a new topic for students. I mean, once we start talking about it, they realize that they have witnessed and been part of these practices all along, but they often have really not thought about it in any kind of a systematic, or, I mean, probably thought about it too much anyway as philanthropy. So we had a text that was primarily documentary sources going back um, prior to um, the colonial period and into beyond influences from around the world. And so what I did was to create a new similar book for the class using press books. And so that enabled me to carry forward some of those primary texts that I wanted to carry forward. I could re-edit them. I had to re-edit them actually myself and recut them and redo them and make sure that they met the needs of the class. And it allowed me to bring in lots of new things too. And so I have gotten positive comments from the students, just thank you for doing this. And from the other instructors that teach the class too, by the way, because they aren't coping with students who are struggling with the text as well. And, students really can see much better the collective of all the materials that we're looking at across time. In our other text, there were many, many other things that we couldn't use in the class. And so this really has streamlined it. And I do feel like I have better luck with students actually reviewing the materials. It's much easier for them to do and access. And so it's really been a positive development for all of us that teach the class, and positive feedback from our students on it too.
Like Jen, I helped develop an OER in WordPress, Pressbooks. And so I've been kind of double dipping as far as my classes are concerned, because one of the big challenges of putting together an OER is time for the person who's developing it. I see everybody nodding, yeah. And so we did have to invest a lot of time as instructors and developers of the press book. But now that we have like a draft, and it's going to be a work in progress, which I actually love as both a composition person and a purveyor of OERs, because I love the notion that we can keep making it better. But what I've been doing is I teach a 300 level course that works with IU Online in that collaborative program. And so part of that course is a service project. And every semester I have at least one or two students who can't find a service project. And I have one for them, and I have them review the OER that we developed for W131. So most of these are English majors, they're juniors and seniors, so they've already taken 131, they have a lot of experience already. So then they go back and they get to become collaborators on the textbook for our first year comp classes. And that's been a really interesting experience, working with these older, more experienced students to try to enhance and improve the OER that we developed for first year comp.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. And it's something I want to lift up is something that has been mentioned about the time commitment that it takes to create an OER, adapt an OER, remix an OER, whatever you're doing with it. And so I would love, again, in the interest of having an honest conversation about OER adoption on a university campus, if you all could share some challenges that you face with implementing OERs, but also some solutions that you have either implemented to help you resolve that you're still working towards. That way people can see the challenges, but also see the upside as well with OERs.
I guess I can go first. And it actually kind of connects with the AI question, but I'll probably be able to get into that a little bit more because it's not directly about this question. But so for one of my graduate level courses, I'm redoing the second half of the class basically to address generative AI and what it means for education. Um, and so I'm building something, and what I actually don't use press books, and I do that intentionally because I want to model for these teachers and these people who are going to be teachers how to use existing tools that they can use to make their own stuff. So I typically use like Google Sites. Um, and so like I'm creating like an AI challenge for them, and it leads them through the process of like considering of presenting to the board whether it's a good idea to use generative AI as a tutor in classrooms. And each week is a piece of the puzzle basically. Um, and I'm actually having a lot of fun with it because I'm using generative AI to make all the graphics. I'm using uh, Google, what is it called? Notebook LM, which you give it like I give it. Notebook LM actually takes materials and turns it into a podcast is the best way to describe it. It's really cool. I give it all the readings for the week as well as my goals for the week. And so what it does then is it creates a podcast based on the goals and the readings. And so I use that as sort of like the week introduction to the material for my students. Um, but I'm also, like I said, I'm having fun with it. Like it's actually like the experience is structured through meals. Like, I'm deciding to be like creative. Like, it starts off with having cheese, crackers, and tea every day. And so, like I have to think about what kind of cheese. Like, like I'm probably focusing too much on the food. But the thing is, that's what makes it fun. And then it just takes a long time. It takes a lot of like a lot of thinking because you're going somewhere that it's uncharted territory more or less. So you're creating um this pathway that it's not there. I used to do a lot of cross country skiing when I was in my younger years, and like you never want to cross country ski in a place where no one has cross country skied before, because like you just use all your energy making the path. And that's what I'm finding myself doing. Just using the energy to make a new path that no one has done before. Yeah, see, there you go. Um, so I'll just quickly respond to that question. Um, it's basically cost, and typically what it is that K-12 schools, they do everything through Google. Uh, what is it called? Workplace or work, whatever it is. So they use Google Docs. They use Google, everything Google right now. So
Yeah,
that's
and
what
if I could add on to that question in the chat, so for reference for everyone, the question in the chat was about Do you know if K-12 educators are restricted in what digital platforms they use, not counting expense? And so going off of what Jeremy was saying, like it is a lot about the Wi-Fi at the school as well. I know there is a professor here in the School of Ed. I'm sure you know her. I don't know if you know her, Jeremy, but Dr. Garvin Hudson. And so she is implementing virtual reality in a K through 12 setting. But a lot of the virtual reality platforms that she's using are not accessible in the school, given the school Wi-Fi. And so because of that, she had to find alternative platforms that the school Wi-Fi accepts for the students to be able to use during that time period.
Yeah, it is ridiculous the way. That's another conversation. It's
It's a
ridiculous
whole
the way
nother
that
conversation.
K-12 schools restrict access to things. So you just
It is. Besides Wi-Fi connection and time, are there any other challenges that people have seen with implementing OERs that they would like to share to the group?
I would just say to get connected with you, Charisma. I worked very heavily with Bill Orm, who's now retired. Just connecting with the librarians and Jana years and years ago got me started on this path. Um, because there's a lot of material out there already, and so we don't always have to create our own path. And yeah, if you don't have to, don't go find a librarian to help you find a path that's already kind of been cleared away for you. It's super great.
Yeah, I agree. Working with the library and also I met the through the program I did, and maybe we'll get to that charisma a little bit, but I also met the copyright gurus for the university and really had a great network of support through the fellowship program, um, and real used turn to everyone quite a bit. In fact, I still turn to people. Um, I was just asking Jerry a question about Creative Commons licensing for some research we've done. So I think, of course, we're talking about OER and teaching, but it's, another aspect of it is you're in our research and in that kind of public work that we might do too. And I will say it did take a lot of time and patience to do my project, and I did some of it over the summer. And I'll say also, a doc, one of our doc students who teaches is what an instructor in the class as well. We did it together, so we worked together to do it, and so I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity to work with her. We co-authored it, has our names on it. It's goes on her Vita as well. It's good for her career and also great experience, and for both of us, to be honest. So I think if there's an opportunity to do it collaboratively, and Jennifer shared a different example of Jennifer M. of how she has been able to do that, and maybe other people have examples too of doing not feeling like you're doing it alone. And you don't with the library, to be honest. You don't feel like you're alone, even if you are alone.
These are great plugs that you're putting in for the library. I would end the call on that, but I want to keep the good conversations going. If you have more positive things to say about the library, please feel free. In the chat, there is a question I do want to ask, and I do also want to go back to the AI question later. But since we were already talking about collaborations, I want to really hit on this question right now. What was the department or your faculty peer response to hearing about your OER experience? Did you have any departmental support or pushback?
So I think, my department, at least initially when I was started doing OER, which was 2014, 2015 for this university, most of my colleagues were skeptical. They liked the sort of all-in-one packaging that a publisher could do and weren't real sure about having to figure out things for themselves, like, how do I ensure students are reading? What are the assignments I'm doing? Those kinds of things. I will say that the COVID pressure of all of them having to switch to online really did away with a lot of the challenges that they saw with OER because they basically just picked up my class as a whole and moved it to their teaching portfolio. And that's been one of the most interesting things is that I've now had 4 or 5 different colleagues who've taken my entire OER course with all the quizzes and all the assignments and all the materials and all the announcements and everything, and they've now taught it as their own. And so I've gotten feedback from them about, how things worked for them, what they would do differently. And it wasn't just people who were specialists in my area that were doing it. So I had colleagues in different subdisciplines. And that made a huge difference. I think having them have to teach and engage with an OER in a meaningful way in their own classroom, I do think made them much more amenable now to using an OER that they choose because they see how it can work when somebody sort of put a lot of thought into how the course pedagogy and mechanics work from start to finish in a 16-week semester.
I feel really alone, but I do need to connect with the librarians more. But I am actually the only educational technology person in the School of Education, so so I am alone. But I will say that I did a presentation a couple of years ago about actually the campus-based OER, and that was well received. I shared about some of the insights that some of the connections that some of the students were making, and so the my colleagues really enjoyed going through that process and understanding what that process was.
The English department has been very supportive. Um, and it really did kind of, our timing dovetailed with the pandemic. So, all through that spring 2020 semester, I had, colleagues calling me in a panic because they didn't know how to use Kaltura or Google or Zoom or whatever. So, by the time we came back to campus, I think enough of them felt like they had some experience teaching more online. And so the concept of using an open educational resource that was available to students online on the first day at no cost, it was an easy sell at that point. Plus, I felt like I had some leverage. They owed me as I walked them through all of that for those first few weeks when we were all online. So I was like, don't talk to me unless you're ready to hear the truth.
I I've shared the project with my colleagues, and everybody is positive, and I think in our field we run into the issue a lot that there's no textbook. I mean, it's not like other fields where there's, you publishers publishing, hundreds of textbooks and you're trying to pick. And okay, it is just not like that in our field. And so um, I think I would anticipate in the future that others would do some similar things because it's just a different modality, and our field is just at a different maturity level than many of the other more traditional disciplines, I guess I would say. So we'll see what the future holds. But hopefully others will be able to do something similar in the future or different. I think we heard a little bit about everybody's different uses, but there's a whole range of different examples that are in the room today.
There are, and even possibly even more like on the horizon. Going back to the question that was put into the chat, and also for attendees, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and I will ask them to our panelists. Dr. Piper did ask earlier about if you have any experiences adopting AI, using AI with OER, or if you were thinking about doing it in the future. And so I know, Jeremy, you talked about this a little bit more. I don't know if you want to word vomit a little bit more, or if anyone else wanted to share their thoughts about this topic as well.
I don't know if I want to word vomit, but I'm actually taking a break from writing a proposal for the Institute for Educational Sciences for a national center on improving post-secondary instruction with generative AI. So that's what I'm doing right now. So yes, like I've been thinking about this a lot. Um, you know, I actually rarely do anything without AI at this point. And what that means is that I'll write something or think through something and then ask it for advice. Um, and it helps me sort of think through um, some of the things that I might not have thought about. It helps me think through, it helps me clarify some of my language because sometimes I do word vomit. And so it cleans it up for me. But I think, and actually the end goal of that activity structure that I mentioned is that my students are going to be creating their own AI chatbot using a platform called Poe. And what it is they'll have the opportunity to, sort of uh, give it some of the important reading, some of the things that they think are important readings, and write a script basically that helps shape the personality of the chatbot and stuff like that. So I think that this is something that's having an impact on pretty much everything. And I don't think that we should be like K-12 schools and try to block things that we don't fully understand. And I think that the only way to move forward is to have critical and thoughtful dialogues about it and dialogue about it. And so by incorporating it in your teaching, by incorporating it in your materials, by using it and being able to talk about it, I think it's something that's better than not.
I actually just did a AI project with Adam Maxwell, who's a faculty fellow for UITS Learning Technologies, and we created a chatbot for my professional writing students in Copilot, and so they had an assignment that they were, supposed to be imagining they were in a scenario where they were developing an employee handbook for a very small company. And this project, I had done it for years, where they would send me the questions and I would pretend to be the owner of this company. And it took me hours and hours and hours every time I did the project. And we created this chatbot and just populated it with all of the answers I had been giving my students for the past 5 years. And it saved me so much time. It was a little bit of time at the beginning with Adam and helping to program the chatbot, but it was really kind of cool. And the students really kind of loved it. Many of them had never used any kind of chatbot, so it was a new experience for them. And we worked through some of the kinks, which was fun to kind of troubleshoot with the students and see what came out of it, and work that back into our OER later on.
I have not used it with the OER. I made this book a couple of years ago now, and so have just been kind of updating and adding to it at this point. But I was just thinking it would have been very helpful because I had to modernize Old English text by hand um, in order to use these primary source materials, changing some of the words to things people would understand now, and just some punctuation and weird things like that. And so it would have been, it seems to me that it would have been a great tool. I could have put it in, put that text in there and asked it to do those like changes and tweaks for me. So that would have been very nice to be able to do it. And it could have maybe helped me with some of the editing and help me find the sections that relate to philanthropy, I don't know how good it would have been, but I would have at least now tried to see how it could make that process go more quickly and be less manual.
Thank you all for sharing how you've been using AI in a productive way. I know that's a constant conversation that we're having right now about how do you effectively use AI as an assistant, as a helper. And I love how none of you said you were using AI to completely write your OERs, right? You're using it as a tool to help you along the way, which is a great distinction that I love that you're all making.
It could just say another really quick thing. So
Hmm.
I also have fun with things that are called like frontier technology. So like companies that are sort of pushing the limits a little bit. There's a company called Sesame that just released this tool. Like it's like talking on the phone with somebody. And like it's able to respond and like that quickly. And so I was like talking through some things like because I was testing it out, and I said I want to address this standard in this way, and I'm thinking about using pickling with fifth grade students. And it was like, pickling with fifth grade students, they love those crunchy cucumbers, but I don't think it's a good idea for 10-year-olds to like have access to vinegar and salts and everything and make a mess. So like it was just really like it was an interesting perspective that my wife probably would have thought of it, but like but I hadn't thought of it, and so it gave me a different kind of perspective. So
So thank you. It was so you said Sesame, that's what it's called?
the company is called Sesame, and
Okay.
I think Maya and Mike are the the two things.
Okay, this is great. I hope you're all taking notes about all this great stuff. Jeremy, you can spell sesame, but it's okay. We have Google. We do have another question in the chat that I do want to lift up. What would you, as practitioners of OER and faculty, like to see your institutions do to help maintain and expand OER use and development? And they said you could talk about this on a school-wide way, a departmental way, individual faculty member level.
I think one thing is for there to be more avenues for OERs to be reviewed. One of the challenges as faculty of doing OER development is getting people to understand the tremendous amount of work and time and energy, but also peer-reviewed scholarship that goes into doing or developing an OER, whether that's scholarship of the content or scholarship on pedagogy that you've had to master in order to do your development. And I think it'd be very nice if that work was more explicitly recognized by campus as being vital to the mission of the campus as a whole. We are a campus that says, we want to lower barriers for students to be in college or for people to be here. And I think, doing a better job to increase the support that the library has to work with people on developing OERs, but also to increase the recognition that people get when they're doing OER development would be tremendously helpful.
Financial support obviously is so helpful too. My partner, Andy Bushnow, who's our director, he and I were able to get a grant from the Chancellor's Circle. And so that allowed us to pay our pilot faculty a stipend for their work in the pilot. And I mean, it was so nice to be able to say, hey, we have this project we'd really like your help on, but we can actually give you some money for it. That's not something we get to do very often. Usually it's like, oh, it'll look good on your FAR, it'll look good on your CV, which is, yeah, but especially since we were also working with a lot of associate faculty who, they don't even do a FAR. So that kind of financial support was huge for us, especially in the pilot.
I mentioned that I was part of a fellowship program, and so back to the library. Again, charisma. I'm not a ringer, planted in the audience by charisma, but um, there's a program here that does include a financial stipend that can be summer support, for example, for those of us who are not on a year-round contract. But also along with that was a whole educational program and a cohort of others that she worked through learning about OERs and all these things you should think about, from like accessibility to copyright to universal design, and so there was a educational program that we moved through with a lot of support, got to know a lot of leaders across IU working in this space, and had assignments and deadlines and milestones to help in our progress. And so I think that was a really helpful impetus and encouragement and support system to have for our project.
Yeah, I would say yes to all of the above, but back to the point about what it looks like, and like faculty are want to keep their jobs and want to get promoted and tenured and all that kind of stuff like that. And so I think in addition to um, the having those communities of practice, which are wonderful, having the financial support, which is wonderful, like everyone else who does reviews of your stuff, like also has to acknowledge, like has to recognize the value of it too, because if they don't, then they won't. I mean, like I've run into this with community engaged research, but and so so having some sort of way um, to build that value across the faculty as a whole, or maybe just get rid of the tenure promotion system and do it completely differently. So that would be something too. So
Thank you all for your feedback. I think everyone's been giving a lot of great advice here. I am curious, not just because I'm the open education librarian, but I would love for you, if you have an answer to this question, if you could share what is next for you in terms of OER. Do you have any upcoming projects that you're working on? I know, Shaker, you were mentioning just the continual revising of your press book, but I don't know if anyone has any upcoming projects that we can get like a sneak peek into.
I'm trying to push for, so we have 4 courses in the writing program. So we have the first year comp that everybody takes, but then we have 3 second level courses. And I adopted OER for my second level course a few years ago. But I'm really trying to push for everybody else to adopt it as well, because again, that was the course that kind of inspired me, because it has this ginormous, heavy, expensive, traditional print textbook. And I'm like, let's dump that dinosaur. And there are actually some really fantastic OER that are already out there. I just adopted one of those. And because of the copyright license, the way it was written, I was able to like take pieces and parts of it and just copy and paste them right into Canvas, and they're so pretty. And I'm really trying to push for the rest of the faculty teaching that course to do the same.
This is not super exciting, but I one thing I'm doing is I organized a panel at a conference that will be on OER, just so trying to spread the word. Um, and as the conference is located in another university, so I reached out to their OER librarian and asked if she would want to do this panel with me. And our association has a repository, an OER repository of syllabi and other instructional materials. So I reached out to them and said, let's all do this session together, and can encourage people to, put things in the repository or learn about the licensing, like Jennifer was just talking about, the Creative Commons licensing and all that. So that's just something I'm trying to do to help spread the word. I don't immediately have another project to do another text, although I'm teaching a class on celebrity and philanthropy right now, and I really wish that I had there was a text for that. It's a very hard class to select all the curriculum for that class. So I think there would be a lot of opportunity to do more in our philanthropy space. And I'm intrigued by all the neat things that others are doing, um, so that are not creating a whole text, but using it in other ways. So thanks for asking. And I'm learning from everyone in the room too.
Charisma, can I say something?
Go ahead.
Hi, for those I don't know, my name is Jamaica Piper. I am the Education Humanities Librarian. I just dropped a link in the chat to a project that I actually am going to be a topic editor for. We literally just met today. So this will be some forthcoming, but if anyone's interested, we will be looking for open, so the whole OER, but with the AI focused project. So if you are working on something or might be working on something, we will be soliciting for your projects to put together as part of a repository.
Just
Well,
another great example about all the great work you can get by connecting with your library and your librarians.
she was there all the whole time. So Jamaica, we'll be in touch.
So I think to go to Jerry's question too, that's in the chat about library maintenance. I think one of the things we're all going to have to confront very quickly is the change in accessibility standards for those of us who are working with materials that are bringing together sections of books or portions of materials. I know I've got a class where I've got a ton of PDFs that are going to have to be remediated. And I'm going to have to make some decisions about how I do that and what format that is. I think one of the key things, though, the questions about maintenance of OERs that strikes home is, you know, having the library have a larger role in UITs and the decision-making process in UITs about the technologies that the campus is supporting, but also when they're choosing to do away with technologies, what that means for those of us who use OERs. So, if they do away with a quiz tool or they're doing away with a tool that's embedded inside of Canvas, that often for those of us who are using OERs means we've got to go back and rebuild sections of a course. And so it would be great to see more integration between UITs and the library so that the technologists working in UITs understood a bit more of how OERs are being used in library and UX environments and how what may seem like a minor decision in the tech space actually turns out to be a major amount of work for the libraries and for faculty working with library resources. And that's my major concern right now is sort of like, how am I going to remediate things that have been in the project and in the OER for, 5 years, 10 years, etc.
Thank you for bringing it up about accessibility. And Mahoney also put it in the chat. I'm sorry, I'm going by your last names now since there's two Jennifers. How Mahoney was sharing their experience with using the CTO and the people there like Jenny Young. And so as we transition to end, I do want to uplift our full week of open education events that are happening because Jenny Young is actually doing our workshop tomorrow about using Pressbooks, which a few of the panelists have talked about that they've used themselves. And Jen Young has also been one of the forerunners of talking about accessibility with all the changes like Jennifer was mentioning with PDFs and accessibility with that. And so if you want to connect more on that topic and learn more about accessibility, but especially with Pressbooks, that'll be a workshop that's happening tomorrow. On Wednesday, it will be our Wiki Wednesday, going over using Wikipedia in the classroom. And so that event is actually hybrid. You can be in person here at the library or virtual with a light breakfast offered to you as well if you want to come visit the library on Wednesday. And Thursday, we are having a tabling event if you want to encourage your students to come by the university library to share their textbook stories. Open education is something that we're all doing, as all the panelists have mentioned, for the benefit of the students, thinking about them in terms of their cost of what they have to pay for, them being able to actually access the information, be able to read it and understand it and comprehend it to be the best student they can be. And so we also want to keep including them in the conversation when it comes to open ed. And so if you want to encourage your students to stop by the university library this week, we will love to hear their textbook story as well. So that way their voice can continue to be heard in this conversation. But as we close out, I do want to once again just thank my panelists for coming, working with the technology issues, and sharing their experience with using open education. As we close out, I don't know if you all have like a quick one sentence or phrase about the benefits of using open education that you would like to share for everyone as we get ready to leave. One bit of advice. I know you've given a lot.
It's fun.
Beautiful.
I think start small. If you haven't done it before, just start small.
I was hesitant to do it but I am so glad every day that I did it. Very happy. So
Yeah, it really provides so many benefits in just one project for the students.
Awesome. So start small, have fun with it. Don't forget to just enjoy the process of doing it, the ups and downs. And once again, just thank you all for attending. I hope to see you at other open education events as well. And if you want to connect with these lovely panelists, I also encourage you to do that as well to ask any more follow-up questions. So with that, I hope you all have a good rest of your day.